Shalom Rav Katzin. It's an honor and privilege to be with you, my friend, and to be able to share words of appreciation for the incredible miracle we have of a modern state of Israel with all the members of RAGE, the Russian American Jewish Experience, the younger members. A schut, a real honor and a privilege for me. Thank you.
It is really amazing privilege for us because we live in the United States and we have students all over the country. And when you live in Israel, you take Yom Ha'atzmaut, the Israel Independence Day, for granted because everybody's celebrating, everybody's happy. Here in America, it's a regular day. So we would like really to feel, what do you feel today?
Thank you. Firstly, I want to say, Rav Katzin, and to all the members of RAGE, I want to say the following. One of the biggest differences I have found, I'm from Johannesburg, South Africa. I spent a lot of my life in South Africa. I went back to South Africa as a rabbi after I made Aliyah. And I've been back in Israel as the head of the world Mizrachi movement, the religious Zionist movement that I'll say a word about. But I'll say one of the most profound differences between living in Israel and living outside of Israel is the experience of Yom HaZikaron, the Memorial Day for the fallen soldiers, and Yom Ha'atzmaut. It's so difficult to explain unless you've experienced it. On Yom HaZikaron, one of the most profound experiences I had on Israel's Memorial Day for the fallen almost 25,000 soldiers is that on this day, when you go to the military graves, around every single grave, there is a soldier, there is a family. I've never seen that anywhere in the world before. You know, as a rabbi, I officiated at funerals where thousands of people went to, but I've never experienced going to a cemetery and on all the tens of thousands of graves, there were families around them. Each grave had a family around them. You really feel what it is a national day of mourning. That's on Yom HaZikaron. And then we move into the day after, today, Yom Ha'atzmaut, and then you feel what it's like of a national day of celebration. It's an unbelievable feeling of the country. It's a public holiday and a real sense of experiencing the miracle of Israel. And that's what I want to share very briefly with all the members of RAGE. Just one aspect of the remarkable miracle of what it means to be part of a modern state of Israel, the 74th year since the establishment of the state of Israel. I want to share it with you like this. You know what is amazing is that one of the most profound things that happened on this day, 74 years ago, when the state was established, was written by Golda Meir. Golda Meir, the first so far and only, and hopefully the others, Prime Minister of Israel, who was a woman. She was a young lady present at the declaration of the state in 1948. And she writes in her memoirs called My Life, that, you know, when she cried the most, when Ben-Gurion read out these words, there was one word he said, one sentence that she cried the most. She couldn't stop her tears. What did he say? It says in the Declaration of Independence that the gates of Israel will be open for immigration without restriction. She cried. She said, you know what that means? She said, since the Churban Beit HaMikdash, since the destruction of the temple, until the end of the British mandate 74 years ago, Jews were always restricted in how many Jews could make Aliyah. With all 14 empires that ruled Israel, from the Roman Empire until the British mandate, always Jews were restricted from coming here. My own grandparents on my mother's side, who left Kovna, Lithuania, also from the Russian Empire, from Kovna, Lithuania, tried to get into Israel in 1937 and they couldn't. And therefore they had to find somewhere else to go. They managed to escape the Shoah and they came to Johannesburg, South Africa. And you know what is incredible? Even until 1940, even until 1948, even during the terrible years of the Shoah, the Holocaust, where 6 million Jews were killed, still the white paper, the restriction of Jewish Aliyah remained in place. Listen to this. Even when there were 250,000 Jews after the Shoah who could not go back to their homes, were sitting in DP camps. They were in these transition camps in Europe. They were still not allowed to go to Israel, to Palestine. Ships were turned around and sent back to Europe. People were sent to Cyprus, even when Jews, not only after they were murdered, but even when they had nowhere to go afterwards, and Jews, homeless Jews were arriving, they were not allowed to come. And says Golda Meir, you know why I cried? Anyone who understands Jewish history understands that with the state of Israel, the borders of Israel have been open to Olim every single day without fail, even during Corona, which was so hard for non-Israelis to visit Israel. It was very, very hard. But people could make Aliyah. Through the wars, people have made Aliyah. And you know, over 3 million people have made Aliyah. And Israel has gone from a country which had 600,000 Jews 74 years ago to almost 7 million Jews today, the largest country by far of Jews anywhere in the world. And you know what the miracle of Israel is? And I want to say to each and every one of you, you have a home in Israel. No matter what happens in your life, you are able to make aliyah. You don't need any green cards. You don't need to go through any process. You don't need to prove that you've got any value to add to the state of Israel. If you are a Jew and you have the right to return to Israel and the right of return and wish to return, the state of Israel not only welcome you with open arms, they will pay for your ticket. They will give you rights. They will teach you the language on their own account and will give you all types of rights in Israel. And to me, this thing, there's so many things I could say, but in this short time, I want to say one of the greatest acts of chesed, of camaraderie, of love of our fellow Jew is that the state of Israel, since 1948, having a Jewish government in Israel means that this country is open to Jews all over the world at any time. What a miracle this is. And I think that this is one of the greatest acts of kindness and chesed. It's what's known in the prophecies as kibbutz galuyot, that in the future, there has been these prophecies more than any other prophecy. The prophecy that all the prophets have envisioned is that you know what the future redemption will look like for the Jewish people. The exiles will come from all over the world, speaking so many languages from different cultures, as you all know what is in Israel. The Russian, the Ethiopian, the French, the English, all over the world. People are coming back all of the time. And that is the great miracle. The great miracle is of kibbutz galuyot, of ingathering of the exiles, unparalleled in human history, to have people coming from all around the world back to this country. And soon there's going to be a video that we produced a while ago on the 10 miracles, prophecies that have been fulfilled in the state of Israel. There are so many more prophecies, but you'll see this video. It's amazing. Living in Israel is living in a land of prophecy, living in a land where the dreams and visions and prophecies of our sages and prophets years ago are being fulfilled. And it's what a zchut and privilege that all of us know, wherever we are in the world, we all have a home in Israel whenever we want to come, and the gates are always open for Jews to come. And what a privilege. That's all because we have the state of Israel, which was established 74 years ago.
Thank you so much. And I think that the relevance of your message is very felt today. Many of us actually left the Soviet Union when it was about to collapse, or many people already left their countries when they were collapsing, and it was a big chaos, 90s and so on. But like evil empire of Egypt collapsed, and that caused, in a way, Egypt, aliyah, or vice versa. The fact that Jews were fighting for freedom caused the slavery to collapse. Either way. So even the fighting today in Ukraine and, this horrible war with all the pain produces waves of tens of thousands of Jews returning home.
It's unbelievable.
Riots in New York City. Riots in New York City last year produced so many of my friends, our own Rage family members, made aliyah and today live proudly in Israel.
I mean, it's unbelievable, Rav Katzin, what you're saying today with the horrific situation in the Ukraine. Israel's borders are open. Any Jew and anyone with the right of return there. 50,000 Jews in Ukraine and another 150,000 who can come with the right of return. The borders of Israel are open. There are our own organization, Mizrachi, our movement. The Mizrachi movement is the religious Zionist movement. We ourselves are celebrating 120th year when Herzl founded the Zionist movement. Many religious Jews didn't know how to reconcile Judaism with secular Zionism. But the leaders of Mizrachi stands for Merkaz Ruchani. These were great rabbinic leaders, spiritual center, which believed you can have national secular Zionism and you can have religion and they can work together. Tzionut, Israel, and Zion and Jewish identity can work together. They don't need to be contradictions. And that's what we experienced the 120th year. And we ourselves sent tens of shlichim to Moldova, to Poland, to all of the borders in order to help Jews come and make aliyah. We ran seders for them, and many seders all around in different places where refugees were. But what the great thing of the Jewish people in the state of Israel is that thousands of volunteers are there and the gates are open. And no matter where the problems are, if they're in the Ukraine today or anywhere, the gates of Israel are always open to Jews everywhere. What an act of kindness and what a privilege when we've got our own country that we know that no matter what, the gates are open. It's an amazing thing, as you said, Ukraine today or wherever it will be in the future.
Thank you so much. And now about the miracles, because yes, you, in a way, in your legacy, in your story, how you came from South Africa is a miraculous story, and now many other miraculous stories become one big miracle, which actually divided into, I believe, 10. You said that the
10 different miracles.
It will be 10 miracles of Israel.
The tiny state of Israel has become world famous for its extraordinary achievements in so many fields. Jewish immigrants from all over the world returned to their homeland, revived its barren wilderness, rebuilt its ruins, and revitalized their ancient language, creating an economic, military, social, cultural, and technological power marveled at the world over. Amazingly, these achievements were all clearly foretold by our biblical prophets who described them so vividly. Let's briefly look at the fulfillment of 10 remarkable prophecies, which are all a living reality in Israel today. And he will gather you in from all the nations to which the Lord your God has scattered you. Perhaps the greatest miracle of all, an unparalleled return to a land of epic proportions. Listen to this. In 1840, there were 6,000 Jews living in the land of Israel. By the time of the Balfour Declaration in 1917, the number grew to 60,000. When the state was declared in 1948, there were 600,000. And today, over 6 million, 6.7 million Jews. The Jewish population of the land climbed from being a tiny fraction of 1% of world Jewry to 6% in 1948, to almost half of all the Jews in the world today. This miraculous ingathering is perhaps a greater miracle than the Exodus from Egypt itself in 3 different ways. Firstly, the Exodus came after 200 years of slavery, whereas the return to modern Israel happened after 2,000 years. Secondly, all the Israelites came out of one country, Egypt, whereas in the modern era, from over 100 countries. And thirdly, in Egypt, all Jews lived in one culturally segregated ghetto in Goshen, speaking only Hebrew, whereas in Israel today, Jews have returned from every possible cultural and ideological background, speaking over 80 languages, somehow all forged into one functional society. An incredible miracle in human history. I will make the land desolate, and your adversaries who dwell in it will be desolate too. Following the Roman conquest of 70 CE, the Jews went into exile. Thereafter, the land of Israel was conquered by 14 different empires over 1900 years. But as the Lord had foretold, the land would remain barren to its conquerors despite repeated attempts to make it flourish, as if the land itself was waiting for the return of her children. In 1867, Mark Twain famously described the land he saw, a desolation, repulsive and dreary, with hardly a tree or shrub anywhere, a land covered in sackcloth and ashes. Until, of course, the return of the Jews. But you, O mountains of Israel, give forth your branches and bear your fruits for my people Israel, for they are soon to come. As the Jewish people has returned to the land has somehow returned to them. The desert has become an oasis, and the desolation a blessing. Israel very quickly started developing world-class agricultural expertise and cutting-edge water conservation technologies, despite the dry climate and vast arid lands. The returning Jews planted over 250 million trees, and Israel is the only nation on earth that entered the 21st century with more trees than it had 100 years before. It's more than 300 wineries, and its grapes, olives, and citrus fruit production are exported the world over. And if you think that is remarkable, listen to this. For then I will make the nations change to speak one clear language. At the time that the first pioneers began returning to the land, the Hebrew language itself was not a spoken language. No Jewish community and not one Jewish family spoke to their children in Hebrew. Hebrew was a language of prayer and scholarship, but not a spoken language as it had been in biblical times. Herzl, with all his great vision for a return to Zion, did not believe that Hebrew could be revived. He believed that German and Yiddish would be the spoken language. Miraculously, Hebrew has become the lingua franca in Israel, spoken by 10 million people the world over, and is the only language in recorded history to have been revived by a people as their spoken language. And of course, Hebrew is the language of the Torah itself. For out of Zion shall go forth Torah, and the word of God from Jerusalem. In the early years of the state, you could fit all yeshiva students in Israel into one small hall, At the zenith of Lithuanian Jewry, there were no more than 3,000 people learning Torah full-time. In Israel today, there are close to 200,000 men and women engaged fully in Torah learning of all worldviews, traditional yeshivot, yeshivot hesder, midrashot, mechinot, and more. There are more people learning Torah in Israel today than arguably at any other time in all of Jewish history. And he will do good to you and make you more numerous than your forefathers. If the Jewish population in Israel has increased 10 times since 1948, its economy has grown 40 times. According to The Economist, Israel has doubled its GDP in the past decade alone, a world record. Recently, Israel's GDP surpassed both France and Great Britain, and according to Bloomberg, Israel's economic stability ranks third in the world. But when it comes to the cows, we rank number 1. And he gave us this land, a land flowing with milk and honey. The average Israeli cow produces 12,000 liters of milk per year. This is the highest in the world, more than countries such as the United States and Holland, which are renowned for their dairy production. Even the cows in Israel are holy. Honey refers to the date honey, and the large sweet dates from the Jordan Valley are amongst the finest in the world. Jerusalem will be settled beyond her walls because of their multitude of people. Jerusalem, the beating heart of Israel. For centuries, the city was off-limit to Jews. The prophet envisioned Jerusalem's population growing so large that its walls would not accommodate the inhabitants. Until recently, this seemed impossible. In 1860, Jews began moving beyond the walls, and Jerusalem today is home to over 900,000 inhabitants, 600,000 Jews, the largest city in Israel today. And all nations on earth will be blessed through you. Despite the tiny size of Israel, there is almost no significant technological advancement which takes place today without Israel's know-how and expertise. Global advancements in sciences, medicine, agriculture, and high-tech have Israel's fingerprints all over them. Jews the world over have won Nobel Prizes in an array of fields, disproportionate to any other people. And 12 Israelis have won Nobel Prizes, more than China, despite it being 150 times larger than Israel's population. Israel has the largest concentration of startups per capita anywhere in the world and has been dubbed the startup nation, and by others, the innovation nation, ensuring that its innovations are a source of blessing to all of humanity. Nations will see your righteousness, and all the kings your honor. The developments during the last 30 years is staggering. The number of countries that have diplomatic relations with Israel has doubled from 80 to 160. Recently, the Abraham Accords with some of Israel's Arab neighbors broke barriers previously seemed impossible, and somehow Israel has been able to turn sworn foes into friends. Israel's achievements in and of themselves are staggering, whether it be in the realm of science or the spirit, technology or Torah, nation building or universal blessing. For example, many countries are looking to learn from Israel's success, being the first country to vaccinate the entire adult population against COVID-19. Even more astounding is that the destiny of this country seems less about politics and more about prophecy. Not just a new phenomenon, but rather a reincarnation of an ancient one, a modern saga clearly foretold by the biblical seers of old, who saw the story of Israel as a central piece of the fulfillment of human history and our collective destiny.